Oh baby, this is going to be a good one. What's up boys? Welcome back to another video, and in this one we're going to be talking about New World. Now for those of you who've been coming by the stream and showing support, first of all, thank you, man. Shout out to the Regime fam out there. Yo, I just want to tell you guys, man, New World has been an absolute blast. I have been playing it extensively. The last closed beta and the open beta, man, have been phenomenal. I think the open beta, we played over 45 hours in a matter of 3 to 4 days. So I'm super excited for the game to come out, and I can't wait to get into this. So let's get it started. The first thing I want to hop into is just my initial thoughts and impressions on the game between playing both the closed beta and the open beta. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. After playing the open beta extensively, I was a little bit nervous. I still am a little bit nervous if I'm being honest with you guys. Now here's why. Between playing the closed beta and the open beta felt like there was a lot more issues, a lot more bugs that needed to be handled, needed to be fixed. Some new ones that we all discovered, unfortunately, in the open beta. After doing some research and kind of seeing some other content creators, seeing some things on Reddit, supposedly we were playing an older version of the game, which I hope is true, because that way a lot of those bugs that were eliminated in the closed beta won't obviously carry into the open beta and kind of backtrack before the release of the game. So by the time the game releases on the 28th, it'll be a much more finished product. One of the biggest game-breaking bugs that I experienced was some of the dodge rolling stuff. Now, it got to the point where you would be rolling. I like to wear light armor. That's just how I play. I like to be very mobile. And when I would roll, every so often, my roll would just stop working and my stamina bar would just completely disappear. And the only way to get rid of it, at least during the closed beta, was you could either duel and lose the duel or win the duel, whichever, and it would reset, or you would have to just die or completely close the game. In the open beta, we tested out the dueling thing. It didn't work. So the only way to really get rid of it was by completely closing out the game. So if you have a queue time, rip, or you could just die, which wasn't a big deal, but still, hopefully they fixed that bug, because in my opinion, that's a game-breaking bug for both PvP and PvE. Some of the bugs included things like the audio bug, where your audio would just randomly drop out. That always sucked. The dodge roll bug that were actually both betas, that in my opinion was probably the most annoying bug of all. People came into the chat saying they couldn't swap weapons or couldn't even auto attack. Random, just crazy FPS drops. Obviously, I think everyone experienced massive FPS drops around towns and cities. So hopefully just optimizing the game for more people, just to make it a more enjoyable experience for everyone. So after playing the open beta extensively, you know, outside of the bugs, the game did feel pretty good, honestly. Compared to the closed beta, it slowed down quite a bit. Overall, I think slowing down the game just a little bit was a good thing. Leveling felt like it took a little bit longer, and you just weren't monotonously just running through mobs and killing everything and not have to worry about it. As you get through the higher levels, the mobs do get harder, they hit harder, and they have more health. So some of those elite mobs especially just take a long time to kill, but as they should, right? They're elite mobs, or just have more people to roll with. The weapon experience also felt a lot slower as well. I didn't get to level as many weapons in the open beta as I did in the closed beta, which kind of made me sad, but like I said, I mean, leveling the weapons is a huge part of the game, if not the biggest part of the game, and slowing that down, it felt good. Some of the bigger PvE changes they made during the open beta, which I didn't do too much PvE, but obviously as you level, you have to do the dungeons and stuff, so I did all that. The mobs did feel, as you got higher level, that they did a lot more damage and they had more health. Now, it's not like unbearable by any means, but it does make it a little bit more difficult and not as monotonous to just level and do things. The dungeons did feel obviously a lot more difficult, and some of those big elite mobs especially felt like they got a massive buff. And like I said, I'm a fan of it. I think that if you're going to be killing elite mobs or doing dungeons, that you go in with the proper sized party and have an ideal composition of some sort, that you shouldn't just be able to slash your way through everything or do everything solo. During the closed beta, I had a life staff, and I was able to like solo elite mobs. It just took a little bit longer. So I think these buffs were definitely needed. Some of the health pools on the elite mobs, like the big grizzly bear that you have to do, and I think it's Brightwood, I don't really remember. It just takes a long time to kill some of those mobs, but overall, I do think it's a good change. The most frequently asked question that I do get in New World is about PvP scaling. Now, as you guys know, I'm an avid PvPer. During the closed beta, the PvP scaling was quite prominent. I was a level 30 and I was able to kill level 60. It did take a long time, but I was able to do it with enough kiting and enough time. In the open beta, they changed it where they kind of reduced it or pulled back, where if you're a higher level, you should be able to kill lobies a lot easier, or if you're a lobby, you're gonna have a lot harder time killing a higher level in theory, which I do think should be part of the game. Obviously, if you're fighting a higher level, you shouldn't be able to just have a pretty good chance of beating them. You should be at a pretty severe disadvantage. So I'm pro change. I think the scaling could be changed a little bit. I saw a suggestion, I think on Twitter or something. I forgot the name, so I apologize. But if you know who this is, feel free to tag them. About maybe making the PvP scaling zone oriented, so those lower levels have a better chance because they're going to be a lot more lower levels running around. especially in like Monarch Bluffs, for example, versus some of the higher end zones. Next, we have the 50 versus 50 battles. Now, I did have the opportunity to actually do one during the open beta, and it was a phenomenal experience. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't really like big scale PvP in any game. I'm more of a small scale PvP kind of guy. It's a lot more fun, a lot more skill based, if you will. So I usually prefer that. But honestly, it was a blast. And I highly recommend, man, if you guys haven't done one or maybe a little timid to do one, sign up. It's so enjoyable. It's a lot of fun to just go to war with your faction and battle it out. I will say I did not get to play during the closed beta, do a war during the closed beta, but for what I've seen and what I've read, they've actually smoothed it out tremendously, and it felt pretty good overall. Now, I did have some frame issues, and I do think they can do some things to optimize it better for a more smoother experience for people, but in general, it felt really good, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing more on live. Small scale PvP. Now, as you guys know, this is probably one of my favorite things to do in New World. This is probably the most active thing that I did in New World between both betas, and overall it did feel pretty good. But I will say this, I would personally like to see some balance changes, and we'll talk about this more in another video more extensively, but it seems like some weapons or some weapon combos are more prominent than others, and by prominent I mean like if you're not using it, it just doesn't work. One of the weapons would be like the Great Axe, for example. I think the Great Axe is probably by far the strongest weapon when it comes to that small scale PvP, or even dueling for that matter, maybe in big scale as well. But I know when it comes to big scale PvP, is not necessarily so much about what you use, but just, you know, having a cohesive team, if you will. But the small scale PvP stuff, some weapons just outshine tenfold more than others. So hopefully we can see some balance changes in that. But I also know that they're not going to be balancing around small scale PvP because wars and stuff are much more prominent into the game. Lastly, dueling. Now, this, in my opinion, has some insane potential. I actually got to duel a lot of different people, a lot of different weapon combos during the closed beta, and honestly, overall, it felt phenomenal. This is before a lot of the changes. I also got to duel a little bit in the open beta. I only duel 1 or 2 different people, and it just seems like there's some balance things that could happen in dueling. I would also like to see maybe some introductions of arenas. I've heard that rumor going around a little bit too, which would be really cool. But I think for dueling, there's certain weapon combos going back to the small scale PvP that just completely outshine others, especially if you follow the dueling etiquette, meaning, you know, not using consumables in duels, not using potions or food, but having something like the hatchet, having a passive heal every so often. And since it's time-based and doesn't really cost any resources, if you play around, I fought a couple people who played around like trees and stuff, and they just sat around a tree and waited for their Zerking to come up. So I think if you implement some rules and some etiquette ways, I think dueling has a lot of potential in the game. I think some dueling tournaments could be really fun with some rules and regulations maybe, but this has a lot of potential, and I'm really looking forward to doing this more on live. To sum things up here in the PvP section, overall I do think it's a good spot. I know the 50 versus 50 wars could be optimized just a little bit better just to make it smoother overall. I know there's been some complaints about offense being too hard to attack on defense. I feel like it should be a little bit more difficult, but I think a lot of that's also based on the people in your faction and the people that you bring to the wars as well. So that'll play a heavy influence. When I did my open beta war, we were on offense and we won in 7 minutes. So it's obviously very doable. It can just be prove to be more difficult. I think when it comes to the smaller scale PvP and or dueling, for example, I personally would like to see some, you know, a little bit more weapon tuning and some weapon balances. Certain weapons just completely outshine others. I think something like the Great Axe is extremely strong, borderline overpowered in my opinion, opposed to something like the bow, which is one of the hardest weapons to use and some of the hardest effective weapons to use in those things. Fire Stab is another insane weapon, which I think I would like to see a little bit more tuning, because I don't want there to be some, you know, meta develop where if you're not using one or two, one weapon or a weapon combo, it's not going to work out. So hopefully by just adding those balances, it'll make it a lot more fun. Town updates. Now, I do think that there are some town updates that were great for the game. One of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing that they updated, was heavily reducing the amount of experience that you got from the town board projects, or the town quests, if you will, where you can kind of just sit there and turn things in. If you got good RNG, you could just turn in materials and things, and they gave you an insane amount of experience during the closed beta, which got heavily nerfed during the open beta. And honestly, I think it should be that way. I do think that people hitting level 60 in a couple days during the New World was kind of crazy, because you could quite literally just sit there with materials and get lucky enough to just spam them, and you would just fly through levels. This way, you actually have to play the game, do the quests, do some side quests to kind of gain experience in that regard. Now, with that said, I will say during the open beta, the town quest did feel a little bit lackluster, in the sense of I personally didn't really care to go out of my way to complete any of those things. It was more just, oh, I have this, I'll just turn it in and get a little bit of experience. But I never really cared to go out, opposed to the closed beta, where I would do the main quest, the side quests, and I would actually go out and do as many town quests as possible, just so I can kind of do them all at once. So it felt a little bit lackluster during the open beta. Hopefully they can change it, or maybe add a little bit more incentive where it could give more gold, maybe a little bit more experience. I actually think maybe even adding like a daily 3-4 quests on the town board where they just have a little bit more buffed experience or more buffed gold, just to incentivize people while you're out and about to kind of complete some of those quests. Faction updates. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the gear. Now, as some of you guys know, during the closed beta, the faction gear was incredibly strong, extremely strong. It actually made a lot of the world drops for me and a lot of the dungeon drops for me quite irrelevant. Like, as soon as I was able to buy the faction gear, I didn't really use anything until the new faction gear. During the open beta, it was nerfed, and I think it was needed, mainly because I think that getting upgrades from different aspects of the game just makes the game feel more dynamic, and you have to just funnel one way of farming gear. I will say the great thing about faction gear, and the reason why I use it through both betas, is because you are able to use, I don't remember what they're called, the tokens that can swap the stats. So for somebody like me, I like to use things like the spear bow or the rapier bow, for example, which is very dex heavy, but I also like to stay in light armor just because I like to be very mobile. So for somebody like me who likes to customize their gear, if you will, by wearing light armor to stay under that threshold where I can still roll at the same time, have it be dex and constitution instead of focus or intelligence, for example, makes it extremely helpful. Overall, I feel that nerf was actually a really good thing for the game. It still makes those faction pieces still relevant, and if you want to farm those 1 or 2 off pieces that you just cannot find through dungeons or quests or through mobs dropping them, that you can just buy those pieces for the meantime until you get actual meaningful upgrades. At the same time, it's not going to completely obliterate all the other pieces of gear that you'll farm elsewhere. So, great change. Last but not least, quests. Now, the biggest thing about the quests, in terms of the main storyline and some of the side quests, I don't have an issue with. Those are completely fine. I think the ones that I want to talk about more are about the faction PvP quests and the faction PvE quests. Now, I spent a lot of time doing these quests because I spent a lot of time farming the currency to buy a lot of the faction gear for PvP. One of the biggest complaints that I've seen about the PvP quests was it was the same thing every single time, the same spots, and you could just spam it, but it just gets monotonous after a while because it's just the same thing over and over and over. And at first, it didn't really bother me, but after a prolonged period of time, I could see it probably getting to that point where it just gets so repetitive, you just don't really care to do it anymore unless you absolutely have to. What I suggest for this is I think it'd be really cool to maybe have a set of like maybe 12 different quests or something where it kind of cycles every day at a certain hour. You get a whole new set of PvP quests just for that day. So it just changes things up. But I still think it needs to be the same for everybody, just because I know it would incentivize actual PvP to happen where those spots are. Okay, so the PvE faction quest. Now, this is probably the most annoying / frustrating thing in my opinion, and I don't know if this has been addressed yet. Maybe it has, and if it has, please let me know down in the comments below, because I'm not actually sure. I tried to do some research on this and I couldn't really find much, but there will be times where I want to get on with some of my boys and we may be on different parts of the, main story quest line, may have different side quests. So we just end up doing the PvP faction quests because it's something we can all do together. We can farm some points up and have a good time. But there's times where you just want to switch it up because of the PvP quests. So one thing that we found incredibly frustrating after doing the PvP quest for hours and just kind of doing literally the same 3 quests over and over and over and over again is we just wanted to switch it up. And one of the things we wanted to do was maybe try some of the PvE faction quests. But the problem that we kept running into was the fact that we all had different quests, or 2 of us had the same quests, or a couple of the same quests and 1 of us didn't. And we just wanted to like do more stuff together. And we didn't really want to do dungeons, so we just opted for the PvP quests and corrupted zones. So I really hope they change it where when you're partied up with people that you can maybe obtain the same PvE quest. That way just gives us more incentive to play with our friends. To kind of sum things up here, my final thoughts. The game is still being aimed to release on September 28th. They've been posting a lot of stuff on the New World Twitter to kind of keep us updated. I will say at this very moment, I am a little skeptical. I am a little bit nervous after experiencing all the bugs and issues and balancing stuff that they could tweak just to make a better experience for everyone. But assuming that we were playing an older version of the game that wasn't quite as finished, and they will have a more polished version on actual release date, hopefully, that won't be a worry at all. So fingers crossed. Most of the changes that they made to the PvE side of things across the board, in my opinion, were very good, buffing a lot of the health pools and the damage for a lot of the AI across the board in dungeons, on mobs, elite mobs, etc., making the game a little bit more challenging, a lot more intuitive, a lot more fun. Not too hard where it deters people from doing things, but some of the elite quests that you actually might need to get a couple people for to accomplish those things, I think it's just going to be better for the overall health of the game. The PvP side of things could use a little bit more love, in my opinion, especially when it gets to the smaller scale stuff. When it comes to the 50 versus 50, the big wars, honestly, it feels pretty good. Just kind of optimizing it, making it a little bit more smoother for everyone. When it comes to the smaller scale PvP or even dueling, for example, certain weapons just completely outshine a lot of other weapons, like the Great Axe and Fire Staff, for example. I saw a ton of those during both betas, especially the open beta. So I would like to see just some more tweaks to make it just more balanced and a lot more dynamic for PvP for everyone to try out different weapons. And if they were able to do that and do it correctly, I think it'll be in a really good spot. Maybe adding arenas too would be huge. That is it for this video, my boys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any questions or concerns or have anything to add, I would love to hear what you have to say. Make sure to leave a comment down below. If you did enjoy the video, or if there's any help to you at all, boys, make sure to hit that thumbs up, man. Like the video. It helps with the channel so much. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, if you're not already, hit that subscribe button. This goes without saying, but we're going to have a lot more New World content to come, so make sure to be here. Lastly, if you guys want more updates, make sure to follow the Twitter at REVERYXO and hop in the Discord. It's a great time in there. We're going to be looking to start a company for New World. If you guys are interested, West Coast, I'll keep you guys posted with that. Lastly, we do stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/Reverie. We stream anywhere from 4+ days a week, but when New World drops, we're going to be playing a crap ton of New World, boys. On that note, I'll see you in the next video. Rev out. Peace.